In the small town of Elmsbury, nestled between rolling hills and whispering pines, there lived a boy named Nathaniel, though everyone called him Nate. From the moment he could talk, it was clear he was different. At 5, he was already reading newspapers and asking his mother questions about the economy. At 7, he built a makeshift radio from spare parts in his father's garage. By 10, he had won every academic competition in the district. He was the pride of his family, the darling of his teachers, and the quiet inspiration of his peers. But brilliance is a double-edged sword, and while Nate's mind soared, the world around him remained painfully grounded. His parents, loving but poor, struggled to provide. His father worked 2 jobs, and his mother, sickly and often bedridden, couldn't always be there to support him emotionally. Despite the challenges, Nate worked. Every night he studied under a flickering lamp, his textbooks worn and filled with notes in pencil margins. He believed education was his way out, and for a while it seemed he was right. By the time he turned 16, Nate had secured a full scholarship to a prestigious boarding school in the capital city. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. Everyone in Elmsbury cheered him on as he left, carrying with him their hopes and dreams. But the city was not what Nate expected. For the first time, he was surrounded by students who were just as smart, some even smarter, and who came from backgrounds of wealth, stability, and privilege. They wore designer clothes, spoke with effortless confidence, and carried a self-assurance that Nate had never learned. He became painfully aware of his worn shoes, his patched-up accent, and the gap in his cultural knowledge. While others casually referenced European vacations, Nate quietly remembered nights when dinner was just bread and water. At first he pushed through. He kept his head down and studied harder. He avoided distractions, made the honor roll, and even caught the attention of a professor who encouraged him to apply to international universities. But loneliness crept in, slowly at first, like a shadow in the corner of a bright room. Then came Dorian. Dorian was charismatic, reckless, and impossibly magnetic. He had a taste for rebellion and a disdain for conformity. He saw Nate's brilliance, admired it even, but scoffed at his discipline. "You're a genius, man," Dorian said one night, passing Nate a cigarette under the bleachers. "But you're living like a prisoner. When are you going to taste the world?" At first, Nate resisted. But Dorian had something Nate didn't realize he craved. Freedom. Not just freedom from poverty or expectation, but from the crushing weight of always having to be perfect. It started with skipped classes, then late-night parties. His grades slipped slightly, just enough for concern but not enough for alarm. He told himself it was temporary, that he'd bounce back. Then came alcohol, then came drugs, then came silence. Silence toward his old friends back home, toward his mentors, toward the younger students who once looked up to him. His scholarship was put on probation. The professor who once encouraged him now avoided eye contact in the halls. Nate, once known for solving complex equations in minutes, now staggered into class half awake, if at all. He blamed the system. He blamed his background. He blamed everything but himself. When the scholarship was finally revoked, he didn't cry. He didn't call home. He packed his bags and disappeared into the city, crashing on couches, drifting from one odd job to another. Dishwasher, delivery boy, occasional bartender. His brilliance hadn't vanished, just buried, under layers of hurt, shame, and regret. Sometimes late at night he'd still solve math problems on napkins. He'd sketch invention ideas in the margins of old newspapers. But the spark was fading. Back in Elmsbury, his parents waited for letters that never came. Teachers still spoke of him in hushed tones. He was the brightest we ever had. Younger students found his old notebooks in the library and whispered his name like a legend. One rainy evening, Nate stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, soaked and shivering. In his hand was a photo his mother had sent months ago. Him at 10, holding a trophy, smiling like the future was a promise etched in stone. He broke down. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to grieve the boy he used to be. Not out of self-pity, but out of mourning. Somewhere in the storm of pressure, rejection, and loneliness, he had let go of himself. That night, Nate walked into a local community center. Not a university, not a rehab clinic. Just a quiet place where people who had lost something could come and try again. He didn't promise to become a genius again. He didn't vow to change the world. He just asked for help. And for the first time in years, someone listened. Years later, Nate became a mentor to struggling youth in the city. He never went back to the spotlight. He didn't win awards. But in a small classroom filled with kids who felt like they didn't belong, he taught math. He told stories. He listened. He never erased his past. He didn't try to. Because the truth was, brilliance can flicker and people can fall. But sometimes in the right hands, even a flicker is enough to light another fire. And that, in its own way, was brilliance too. 5 years had passed since Nate first walked into the downtown community center, broken and stripped of the boy he once was. The center had become a second home, not the kind with bedrooms and walls, but with warmth, names remembered, and people who asked how you were and waited for the answer. Nate now taught basic math and computer literacy in the evenings. Most of his students were kids from broken homes, young adults who'd dropped out, and a few ex-convicts trying to rejoin a world that had forgotten them. Nate never asked what brought them there, only what they still hoped for. One of those students was Malik, a 15-year-old with fire in his eyes and a criminal record already thicker than most resumes. Suspended from school, angry at everything, brilliant with numbers. Nate saw himself in the boy. "Why are you even here?" Malik asked once, arms crossed. "You don't talk like the rest of us. You sound like a college professor." Nate gave a tired smile. "Because someone once gave me a place to sit when I had nowhere left to go." Malik snorted. "Yeah. And how'd that work out for you?" "I'm still here," Nate said simply. Meanwhile, back in Elmsbury, things had changed. Nate's father had died quietly the year before, heart failure in his sleep. His mother, older and slower, still held out hope that one day her son would call. The town remembered him vaguely now, like a story that used to be exciting but had lost its ending. But one person hadn't forgotten: Maya, Nate's childhood best friend. Now a journalist working for a regional magazine, Maya had returned to Elmsbury temporarily to care for her ailing mother. One evening, while cleaning the attic, she stumbled across an old photo album, pictures of her and Nate as kids. Him holding that trophy, her clapping in the background. On impulse, she searched for him online. Not much came up, just an old article about his scholarship, a few academic papers from when he was in school, and then silence. But a recent community blog mentioned a Mr. Nathan teaching free classes at a downtown center in the city. Her heart jumped. It was a rainy Thursday when Nate looked up from a whiteboard and saw her, standing by the doorway, soaked, holding an umbrella and a face full of memories. "Maya!" She smiled cautiously. "Hi, Nate." The room fell silent. Malik and the other students looked on curiously, but Nate waved them off. "Break time, everyone." They sat in a corner of the room, the hum of old heaters buzzing around them. First it was awkward. Small talk. Memories. Laughter that sounded unsure. But then Maya leaned in and asked gently, "Why didn't you come back?" Nate looked away. "Because I couldn't face what I left behind." "You didn't fail us, Nate." "I failed myself," he said. "I had everything. And I let it go." Maya's voice softened. "You didn't let it go. You lost your way. There's a difference." He didn't speak. But her words lingered. That conversation marked a shift in Nate. Quietly, cautiously, Maya became part of his life again. They spent evenings talking about the past, about the future. She visited his classes, even wrote a piece about the community center. The article, titled "The Teacher Who Forgot He Was Brilliant," went viral locally. Emails started coming in. Former teachers from Elmsbury, old classmates, even the professor who once mentored Nate reached out saying, "I'm glad you found your way back." The center director approached him weeks later. "Nate, you ever think of finishing your degree?" He shook his head at first. But Malik heard and said, "You always tell us it's never too late. So what's your excuse?" Nate stared at the boy, stunned. The words he had once thrown into the dark had come back to him, reflected in someone else.